The massive space station that served as the Galactic Council's meeting place stretched for kilometers in every direction. Its crystal walls sparkled with lights from 1,000 different worlds, and today, those walls were about to witness something that would change everything. Ships from every corner of the galaxy had arrived for the most important military demonstration in centuries. Commander Park Soo-jin stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching through the viewport as alien vessels paraded their latest technology. She had seen this display many times before, but today felt different. Today, humanity would finally show the galaxy what they were really capable of. Her fingers drummed nervously against the command console as she watched the show unfold. The Velkari were going first, as they always did. Their ships looked like they were made of pure starlight, with hulls that shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. Energy shields danced around their vessels in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The crowd of alien diplomats watching from the station murmured in appreciation. These ships were beautiful, perfect, and had never seen a real battle. Next came the Thraxians with their reality-bending technology. Their hulls seemed to exist in several dimensions at once, making them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. The light around them twisted and bent, creating an almost hypnotic effect. Several of the younger alien observers applauded enthusiastically. Park Soo-jin had to admit they were impressive to look at. One by one, each species showed off their finest warships. The Zelkorians brought vessels that could phase in and out of normal space. The Moranti displayed ships covered in organic armor that could heal battle damage in seconds. Each fleet was more advanced than the last, each one representing decades of peaceful development and theoretical engineering. Captain Kim Jae-ho's voice crackled over the communication system from his position on one of the escort destroyers. "Commander, we're getting some interesting chatter from the alien observers. They're placing bets on whether our ships will even make it through the basic maneuvers without breaking down." His voice carried a mixture of amusement and irritation. Park Soo-jin couldn't blame the aliens for their assumptions. When she looked at her own fleet through their eyes, she could understand the confusion. The human ships looked like they belonged in a scrapyard rather than a military demonstration. Blast marks scarred their hulls, and their weapon systems looked bulky and primitive compared to the elegant alien designs. But those scars told a story that no alien ship could match. Every mark represented a battle fought and won. Every dent was proof that these ships had faced the worst the universe could throw at them and survived. While the aliens had been building museum pieces, humanity had been forging weapons in the fires of real war. The moment had finally arrived. Park Soo-jin gave the signal, and the human fleet began to emerge from hyperspace. The first ship to appear was her own flagship, followed by a dozen destroyers, twice as many frigates, and a cloud of smaller escort vessels. Compared to the gleaming alien fleets, they looked like a collection of military antiques. The reaction was immediate and exactly what she had expected. Gasps of surprise quickly turned to barely concealed laughter as alien diplomats got their first good look at humanity's modern fleet. The moment the human fleet fully materialized in space, the alien communication channels erupted with barely contained amusement. The Velkari ambassador, a tall creature with silver skin and too many eyes, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. His translator made his words sound smooth and cultured, but the contempt was unmistakable. "Surely there has been some mistake," he announced to the entire assembly, his voice carrying that special tone reserved for speaking to children or the mentally impaired. The humans appear to have brought their historical collection instead of their actual military fleet. Perhaps they confused this demonstration with a museum exhibition. The laughter that followed was like a wave washing through the massive space station. Thousands of alien delegates from hundreds of worlds joined in, their various forms of amusement creating a cacophony that echoed through the crystal corridors. Some aliens clicked their mandibles in what passed for chuckling among their species. Others flashed colors across their skin in patterns that indicated humor. The more humanoid species simply laughed in ways that would have been familiar to any Earth comedy club. Admiral Lee Hyo-jin stood perfectly still on the bridge of her destroyer, watching the alien mockery unfold on her main screen. Her face had been weathered by decades of real combat, and those lines and scars told stories that no alien in the assembly could understand. She had earned every mark the hard way, in battles where looking pretty meant nothing and staying alive meant everything. The insults kept coming through the open communication channels. A Thraxian military officer wondered aloud if the humans had raided a scrapyard for spare parts. A Zelkorian diplomat suggested that perhaps humanity's real fleet was still in hyperspace, and these were just the support vessels. The Moranti representative made a joke about humans being so primitive they still used metal hulls instead of living armor. Lieutenant Commander Choi Min-ho stood beside his admiral, his jaw clenched so tightly his teeth might crack. His hands had curled into fists without him realizing it, and his whole body was tense with barely controlled anger. These aliens had no idea what they were looking at, no understanding of what those battle scars represented. Every laugh felt like an insult to every human who had died defending their worlds. "Admiral," he said through gritted teeth, "permission to open a channel and explain exactly what these ships have been through." Lee Hyo-jin placed a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder, her touch immediately calming the younger officer. She had been in his position once decades ago, when she had been young and angry and eager to prove herself to a galaxy that didn't take humanity seriously. Time and experience had taught her patience, but more importantly, they had taught her when to use it. "Let them laugh, Min-ho," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of years and the confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. "They're about to learn something today that no amount of explaining could teach them. Sometimes the best education comes from being shown rather than told." The mockery continued for several more minutes, with each alien species trying to outdo the others in their creative insults. Some compared the human ships to ancient sailing vessels. Others wondered if humans had discovered space travel last week and were still figuring out how it worked. The announcement came through the station's communication system in dozens of languages simultaneously. The demonstration will now begin. With basic formation maneuvers, all participating fleets will perform standard tactical movements for evaluation. The alien observers settled back in their seats, many still chuckling as they prepared to watch what they expected would be an embarrassing display of human incompetence. Some had even brought recording devices, planning to share the entertainment with colleagues back home. The general consensus was that this would be over quickly, and then they could get back to the serious business of galactic military planning. Admiral Lee Hyo-jin's voice cut through the human fleet's internal communications with calm authority. "All ships prepare for formation demonstration. Remember, we're not trying to impress anyone yet. Just show them what normal looks like for us." The first movement was supposed to be simple, a basic diamond formation that every military academy in the galaxy taught to first-year cadets. The alien ships had performed it earlier with mechanical precision, their computers calculating exact distances and angles. It was textbook perfect, which was exactly what everyone expected from advanced civilizations. But when the human ships began to move, something extraordinary happened. Instead of the jerky, uncertain movements the aliens anticipated, the human vessels flowed into formation like they were dancing. There was no hesitation, no overcorrection, no visible effort. They simply moved where they needed to be with an ease that seemed to defy physics. Captain Song Yunwoo was at the controls of his frigate, a ship that looked like it had been through a meteor storm, but handled like a dream. His fingers barely touched the controls as he guided his vessel through the complex movements. To him, this was as natural as walking. He had been flying formation patterns since he was barely old enough to see over the control panel, and his ship responded to his touch like it was an extension of his own body. The alien observers began to sit up straighter in their seats. The laughter was fading as they watched something they hadn't expected. These weren't the clumsy movements of primitive vessels struggling to keep up. This was something else entirely. The human ships moved through increasingly complex patterns, without any visible effort. They performed maneuvers that should have required constant computer assistance, but their movements were too smooth, too natural for artificial intelligence. When one ship moved, the others responded instantly, as if they were all connected by invisible threads. A Velkari military analyst leaned forward in his seat, his multiple eyes focusing intently on the display. "Are they using some kind of advanced coordination system?" he whispered to his colleague. "Those reaction times are impossible for organic pilots." But they weren't using advanced computers or secret technology. They were using something far more powerful and far more rare in the galaxy: experience. These pilots had flown together through real battles, where split-second timing meant the difference between life and death. They had learned to read each other's movements, to anticipate what their wingmen would do before they did it. The demonstration continued, and the alien observers fell completely silent. What they were witnessing wasn't just good flying. It was artistry. The human ships moved through space like they belonged there, like they had been born to it. Every maneuver was executed with a precision that made the aliens' computer-assisted formations look clumsy and artificial by comparison. The atmosphere in the observation deck had shifted dramatically. Where moments before there had been laughter and casual conversation, now there was tense silence as the alien delegates prepared to watch the combat simulation phase. This was where they expected the humans to finally reveal their limitations. Pretty formation flying was one thing, but actual combat required the kind of advanced technology that these outdated human ships clearly lacked. The simulation controller, a multi-armed Catherian technician, activated the training drones with obvious reluctance. These weren't the simple target dummies used for basic training. These were sophisticated war machines designed to challenge the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. Each drone was equipped with adaptive shields, multiple weapon systems, and artificial intelligence that could learn and counter enemy tactics in real time. Beginning combat simulation, the controller announced. 57 autonomous defense drones are now active. Engagement parameters are set to maximum difficulty. The drones materialized across a vast section of space, their sleek forms bristling with weapons that could tear apart conventional starships. They immediately began moving in complex patterns, their AI systems analyzing the human fleet and preparing countermeasures. According to every tactical manual in the galaxy, this should have been an overwhelming challenge for any force, especially one using apparently outdated technology. Admiral Lee Hyo-jin's voice came through the communication system with the same calm tone she might use to order coffee. "All ships weapons free. Standard hunter-killer formation. Let's clean this up quickly." What happened next defied every expectation and shattered every assumption the alien observers had held about human military capability. The human ships didn't just engage the drones, they transformed into something else entirely. The seemingly clumsy vessels became fluid instruments of destruction, moving with a deadly grace that was beautiful and terrifying to watch. Commander Yoon Da-eun's corvette was the first to strike. Her ship, scarred from countless battles and looking like it should have been retired decades ago, suddenly became an apex predator. She dove straight into the heart of the drone formation, her weapon systems coming alive with a precision that made the alien observers gasp. In a single, impossible maneuver, she destroyed 3 separate drone clusters. Her ship spun and twisted through space in ways that should have torn it apart, but instead of falling apart, it danced. Her weapons fired in perfect coordination, each shot timed to hit exactly where the drones would be, not where they were. It was like watching someone who could see the future. Several alien military officers jumped to their feet, shouting accusations across the observation deck. Impossible! They must be using some kind of illegal targeting system. One Thraxian general declared. No organic pilot could make those calculations. But there were no illegal modifications, no secret targeting computers, no hidden advantages. What the aliens were witnessing was something their peaceful civilization had never developed. The instincts of warriors who had been forged in real combat. Every human pilot had learned their skills not in safe training simulations, but in desperate battles where making the wrong move meant watching their friends die. The drone swarm, designed to be nearly impossible to defeat, began falling apart under the human assault. These weren't random attacks or brute force tactics. Every move was calculated, every shot placed with surgical precision. The humans fought like they could read the enemy's mind, anticipating every move and countering it before it happened. Combat simulation had ended in complete silence. 57 advanced combat drones, designed to challenge entire fleets, had been eliminated in less than 12 minutes. The human ships floated motionless in space, their weapons powered down, waiting for whatever came next. In the observation deck, Thousands of alien delegates sat in stunned quiet, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Admiral Lee Hyojin had remained silent throughout the demonstration, watching her fleet perform with the quiet pride of someone who knew exactly what her people were capable of. But now, as the shocked murmurs began to ripple through the alien assembly, she decided it was time to speak. Her voice, when it came through the communication system, was calm and measured, but it carried the weight of decades spent in real warfare. "I can see the confusion on your faces," she began, her words reaching every corner of the massive space station. "You're wondering how ships that look so primitive could perform like that. You're questioning whether we're using some kind of secret technology, some hidden advantage that gives us an unfair edge." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "The answer is simpler than you think, but it's also more disturbing than you might want to admit. You see outdated technology because you've forgotten what military equipment is actually supposed to do. You've been building art pieces and calling them warships." The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Many of them had spent careers designing and building the sleek, beautiful vessels that had looked so impressive just an hour ago. Now those same ships seemed inadequate, like expensive toys compared to the battle-tested human fleet. Every scar on these hulls tells a story, Admiral Lee continued, her voice growing stronger. "That blast mark near the engine of my flagship, that's from a plasma cannon that nearly killed my entire crew 3 years ago. We learned from that hit, reinforced our armor, and made sure it would never happen again. That dent in Captain Song's hull, that's from ramming an enemy vessel to save a colony world. The ship survived, the colony survived, and we learned how to build hulls that could take that kind of punishment." She gestured toward the viewing screen where the human fleet was visible in all its scarred glory. "Your ships look perfect because they've never been tested. Our ships look rough because they've been through hell and came back stronger. While you were building vessels for parades and ceremonies, we were building tools for survival." The Admiral's voice took on a harder edge as she drove her point home. "You think our weapons look primitive? They look that way because we've stripped away everything that doesn't work. Every fancy attachment, every decorative element, every system that might fail at the worst possible moment, we threw it all away. What's left is ugly, but it works when your life depends on it." A Velkari delegate finally found his voice, though it shook slightly as he spoke. "But surely your technology must be inferior to our modern systems. Our computers are faster, our materials are stronger, our energy efficiency is far superior." Admiral Lee's laugh was short and sharp. "Your computers are faster at calculations. That don't matter in combat. Your materials are stronger in laboratory conditions that don't exist in real battles. Your energy efficiency is perfect for peacetime patrols where you never have to push your systems to their limits." The silence in the observation deck was becoming uncomfortable. Alien delegates who had been confident and mocking just hours earlier now sat with expressions of growing concern. They were beginning to understand that they had fundamentally misunderstood not just human technology, but humanity itself. Captain Nam Soo-jin, commanding one of the human cruisers, decided it was time to explain the history that had shaped everything they had just witnessed. "I think you need to understand something about humanity," she said, her voice cutting through the tense quiet. "The peace you've all enjoyed for the past 3 centuries under the Galactic Council's protection, we never had that luxury. While you were developing art and philosophy and building those beautiful ships for ceremonial purposes, we were fighting for our lives." The captain activated a holographic display that showed the human section of the galaxy. Unlike the neat, orderly territories of other species, human space was a patchwork of contested zones, neutral areas, and regions marked with the scars of countless conflicts. "This is what our territory looked like just 50 years ago," she explained. "Every system marked in red represents a major battle. Every yellow zone was a contested area where fighting could break out at any moment." A Thraxian historian leaned forward in his seat, his multiple eyes studying the display with growing alarm. The sheer number of conflict markers was staggering. In some areas, they overlapped so heavily that the entire region appeared to be painted in red. "This can't be accurate," he whispered. No species could survive that level of constant warfare. Captain Nam's expression was grim as she replied, "We almost didn't. There were times when we came very close to extinction, but every battle taught us something new, every defeat showed us what didn't work, and every victory proved what did. We learned to build ships that could take punishment, because if they couldn't, everyone aboard would die." She changed the display to show the evolution of human ship design over the centuries. The progression was stark and telling. Early human vessels had been sleek and elegant, not unlike the alien ships in the assembly. But as the timeline advanced, the designs became more practical, more heavily armored, more focused on survival than appearance. "See this early destroyer design?" She pointed to a graceful ship that looked almost artistic in its curves and flowing lines. "Beautiful, wasn't it? We lost 47 of them in the first month of the Centauri Wars because they looked pretty, but couldn't handle real combat stress, so we redesigned them." The next ship in the sequence was noticeably different, bulkier, with redundant systems visible even in the external design. This version lasted longer, but we discovered the power coupling was vulnerable to electromagnetic weapons. We lost 32 ships before we figured out the problem and fixed it. The progression continued through dozens of iterations, each one showing the scars of hard-learned lessons. Systems that had failed were removed or reinforced. Weapons that had proven ineffective were replaced with ones that worked. Beautiful elements that served no practical purpose were stripped away to make room for things that kept people alive. "Every change you see here was written in blood," Captain Nam continued, her voice heavy with the weight of history. "We didn't redesign our ships because we wanted to. We redesigned them because the alternative was watching our people die in battles they should have survived." The alien observers were beginning to understand the true cost of human military effectiveness. These weren't just better weapons and tactics. They were the result of centuries of brutal natural selection where only the most effective designs survived. The mood in the observation deck had shifted from casual amusement to serious concern, but Admiral Lee wasn't finished. She could see in the alien delegates' faces that they were beginning to understand. But understanding wasn't enough. Sometimes the only way to truly comprehend the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical experience was to see it demonstrated in ways that couldn't be ignored. "I think it's time we showed you what these ships can really do," she announced calmly. "What you've seen so far has been us holding back, operating within the safety parameters that your military handbooks consider acceptable. But real combat doesn't follow safety handbooks." The alien observers exchanged worried glances. Several Velkari delegates were already reaching for their communication devices, probably preparing to lodge formal complaints about reckless endangerment. The Thraxian military attaché was frantically consulting his tablet, likely reviewing the safety protocols that governed these demonstrations. Admiral Lee's voice cut through their concerns with casual authority. "All ships, prepare for full combat demonstration. Ignore galactic safety protocols. Show them what emergency combat maneuvers actually look like." The response from the human fleet was immediate and terrifying. Ships that had been moving with controlled precision suddenly exploded into violent motion. Their engines, which had been operating at what the aliens considered normal levels, suddenly roared to life with power outputs that made the monitoring stations scream warnings. Commander, a young Hayens destroyer, was the first to demonstrate what human engineering was really capable of. His ship, already scarred from countless battles, suddenly began a maneuver that defied every principle of safe spaceflight. The destroyer rolled along its central axis, while simultaneously firing every weapon it possessed at maximum capacity. The combination of rotational forces and weapon recoil should have torn the ship apart like tissue paper. Instead, the vessel held together perfectly, its hull groaning but intact, its weapons firing with deadly accuracy even while spinning through space. The alien observers watched in horrified fascination as the destroyer completed its role and smoothly transitioned into another impossible maneuver without missing a beat. "Those G-forces should have killed everyone aboard," whispered a Moranti physicist, his tentacles twitching nervously as he tried to calculate the stresses involved. "Our own crews would be unconscious within seconds of attempting something like that." But the human crews weren't just conscious, they were performing at peak efficiency. Years of real combat had conditioned them to operate under stresses that would incapacitate most alien species. What looked like suicidal recklessness to the observers was simply Tuesday afternoon for veterans who had learned to push their limits or die trying. The demonstration escalated further as more human ships joined in the display. They performed tactical formations that required split-second timing and complete trust between crews. Ships passed within meters of each other at velocities that would allow no room for error. One mistake, one moment of hesitation, and multiple vessels would be destroyed in spectacular collisions. Captain Song Yunwoo's frigate executed a maneuver called the Death Spiral, where his ship corkscrewed through space while firing in all directions, creating a cone of destruction that no enemy could survive. The maneuver was considered impossible by galactic military standards because the rotational forces should have caused structural failure within seconds. But Song's ship had been designed by people who understood that sometimes impossible was the only option available. Every joint had been reinforced, every system over-engineered, every component built to survive conditions that would destroy lesser vessels. The demonstration was winding down, but the impact on the alien observers was just beginning to sink in. What they had witnessed over the past hour had fundamentally changed their understanding of military power in the galaxy. The human fleet, which had seemed laughably outdated when it first arrived, had just demonstrated capabilities that made every other military force look like children playing with toys. Admiral Lee allowed the silence to stretch for a long moment, letting the weight of what had just been witnessed settle over the assembly. When she finally spoke again, her voice carried a quiet authority that made even the most powerful alien leaders lean forward to listen. "I want you to understand something. Very clearly," she began, her words measured and deliberate. "What you've just seen isn't impressive because we're showing off. It's impressive because it represents the minimum level of capability required for our ships to survive in the environment where we operate." The implications of that statement were staggering. If this level of performance was considered routine for human forces, what did that say about the conflicts they had been fighting? Several alien military commanders were already running calculations in their heads, trying to figure out what kind of enemies would require such extreme capabilities to defeat. A Zelkorian admiral finally found the courage to ask the question that was haunting everyone in the assembly. "Admiral Lee, how many ships do you have in your total fleet? Surely this demonstration represents your finest vessels, your most elite units." Admiral Lee's smile was small and cold. "This is Patrol Squadron 7 of the Human Colonial Defense Force. They're responsible for routine security operations in one of our quieter sectors. We have 47 other patrol squadrons of similar capability, plus our system defense forces, plus our rapid response units." The alien delegates were doing math now, and the numbers were becoming increasingly frightening. If this was just one patrol squadron out of 48, and it could easily destroy any other military force in the galaxy, what did that mean for the balance of power they had all assumed was stable? But Admiral Lee wasn't finished. "And of course, none of those units I just mentioned are part of our actual war fleet. The Colonial Defense Force handles day-to-day security operations. Our war fleet is different. It's designed for conflicts against enemies who can match what you've seen today." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the background hum of the space station systems seemed to fade away as the full implications of her words sank in. The human fleet that had just casually violated every known law of military physics and demonstrated combat capabilities beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen was considered a minor patrol force by human standards. Commander Park Soo-jin's voice joined the conversation from her flagship, adding another layer to the uncomfortable revelation. "Most of our serious military hardware has never left human space. We've never had a reason to bring it to galactic demonstrations because, frankly, we've never encountered a threat that required it." The alien observers were beginning to understand that they had been living in a fantasy. Their beautiful, technologically advanced fleets represented the pinnacle of achievement for civilizations that had known peace for centuries. But humanity had been fighting wars that would have annihilated any other species, and they had not just survived, but thrived. The ships you see here, Admiral Lee continued, represent about 3% of our total military capacity. We hope you never need to see the other 97%, because if we're deploying our main battle fleets, it means something has gone very, very wrong in the galaxy. The aftermath of the demonstration was unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever experienced. For the first time in centuries, the comfortable assumptions that had guided galactic politics were crumbling. Species that had considered themselves the pinnacle of military evolution were suddenly confronting the reality that they were little more than ceremonial forces compared to humanity's battle-tested fleets. The change didn't happen overnight, but it was impossible to ignore. Within hours of the demonstration, the first quiet inquiries began arriving through diplomatic channels. They weren't official requests. No species wanted to publicly admit that their military might be inadequate. Instead, they came as casual questions about human training methods, innocent curiosities about ship design philosophy, and polite requests for cultural exchanges that just happened to focus on military traditions. Commander Park Soo-jin found herself at the center of this diplomatic storm. Her communication console had been buzzing constantly for 3 days straight, each message more desperate than the last. The same alien delegates who had been laughing at humanity's primitive fleet were now practically begging for access to human military knowledge. The Velkari request had been particularly satisfying to receive. Ambassador Zelthkar, the same individual who had suggested humans were displaying museum pieces, was now formally requesting a meeting to discuss mutual defense cooperation opportunities. The carefully worded diplomatic language couldn't hide what was really being asked. Please teach us how to build ships that actually work in combat. But the Velkari weren't alone in their sudden interest. The Thraxians, who had been so proud of their reality-bending hull technology, were now asking for human advisors to help them understand why their beautiful ships couldn't perform basic combat maneuvers without falling apart. The Moranti, with their self-healing organic armor, wanted to know why their vessels couldn't take the kind of punishment that human ships absorbed routinely. Park Soo-jin had been tasked with coordinating the human response to these requests, and she was finding the job both amusing and sobering. Every species wanted the benefits of human military capability, but none of them understood the true cost of acquiring it. They saw the end result, ships that could perform impossible maneuvers and survive devastating attacks, but they didn't grasp the centuries of blood and sacrifice that had gone into developing those capabilities. The humans were willing to share their knowledge, but they weren't going to pretend it was easy. Admiral Lee had made that clear in her instructions. Tell them everything they want to know, but make sure they understand what it really means to build a military force that works. The first lesson was always the hardest for the alien species to accept. Human military superiority wasn't based on secret technology or hidden advantages. It was based on a fundamental difference in how they approached the problem of warfare. While other species built weapons for the conflicts they hoped to fight, humans built weapons for the conflicts they expected to lose. Every human ship was designed with the assumption that it would face enemies stronger than itself, that it would operate without support, and that its crew would be pushed beyond their physical and mental limits. This wasn't pessimism. It was realism born from hard experience. The alien requests kept coming, each one more urgent than the last. Species that had spent centuries in peaceful coexistence were suddenly confronting the possibility that their military forces were essentially useless. The comfortable bubble of security they had lived in was revealed as an illusion that could be shattered by any real threat. Park Soo-jin smiled as she processed another request, this one from a species that had been particularly vocal in their mockery just days earlier. The galaxy was learning a lesson that humanity had learned long ago. In the universe, there was no substitute for being prepared for the worst.